right. Well, happy Saturday, guys. I've got to be honest, like going back to real life of like, when you get asked to speak and you fly out and you have a hotel and you speak for an hour or sometimes a few hours, do a seminar and then go home. Today, it's beautiful weather in North Carolina, by the way, beautiful weather before it gets like terrible humid. And so today was unique. You guys, I'm sorry, I went and washed my hands, but I've been weeding with my 5 kids this morning. So it was like, oh, fabulous. We did that. And then I come and like chat with my friends, like my 70 closest friends about Airbnbs. And then we get rocking it, and then maybe I'll go back on a bike ride or something. Like, how great is this that we can learn, we can fill your day. And I hope that some of you, as you're listening to all of these amazing speakers, that you're enjoying the weather also, because it's beautiful out, guys. So happy Saturday, and major props for being on and making sure that this is like that you're learning and growing. And if you've heard me speak before, I talk about, even though I can't see all of your faces, I feel like you're like close, like family, like even closer than family, because when I talk about these things, you guys are interested in what I'm talking about. And sometimes with my family, I start talking about these things and they just kind of glaze over. And so thank you for being my friends. If we haven't met personally, please, please, please reach out to me on Instagram and DM me and tell me that you were on here. And I would love to connect, because I love having other people that are actually interested in talking about short-term rentals. So, a little bit of my background. When I first started in real estate, I was flipping houses. I thought that that was the sexy thing to do, right? I mean, even before Chip and Joanna were making it HGTV sexy, I was trying to do it. And people would come to me and be like, oh, you guys are like Chip and Joanna. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Whose real name in life is Chip? And so I used to flip houses back then. And then we're going to talk about my journey of how, I did notes and I did a bunch of other things. And that was kind of, my resume, the work MeiLani. But the real MeiLani is a mom and a wife and a friend. And there's more to me than just the headshot and the resume of whatever in the past, right? And so sometimes, I don't know if you guys have this problem, but for me, I'm always worried of figuring out which one of that balance is taking over my life, okay? Because I don't think there's going to be a perfect balance, but you have to be able to find a harmony with those two, right? The career and also the family life, right? Or whatever your beautiful day is, whatever your perfect day is, okay? Now for me, these guys, they are why I B&B. They are my everything. We always talk about as real estate investors our why, right? So these guys are my why. And how cool that I was able to like weed and stuff with them all morning and, get them in line, still run the Saturday chore cleanup session before this. I don't know what it's going to be like when we go back to actually traveling, but I think this is awesome. Now for me, I think everybody has a point that they had to choose to make the jump to be a real estate investor. Like, I'm going to commit, because it's scary out here, right? Like, it's super rewarding once you start really working it, but it's scary. And for me, the breaking point, or the jumping point, was when number 3 of my 5 kids was diagnosed with cancer on his 2nd birthday. And at that moment, my whole life changed. And at the time, I was in a job I hated. My husband liked his job, but it definitely wasn't providing the lifestyle we wanted. It was a great income, awesome income. I had a great income, but it just wasn't providing the lifestyle that we wanted. And so at the time when AJ, number 3, was diagnosed with brain cancer, we kind of just 2 family mottos evolved. And the first one, my last name is Hock. And the first motto that came during this time was, Hawks do hard things. And I love that motto because I want to make sure that my kids understand that as we were going through cancer treatments, and at the time I had a 6-week-old, and I had to take AJ down to Florida to live for 3 months during his radiation treatment, and we were apart, and it was a hard time. I'm not gonna lie, it was a hard time. But we came up with the motto that Hawks do hard things, because it's not a matter of if hard things are going to come, it's a matter of when they are going to come. And if each of us in our life can really understand that the mindset of being prepared and having the mindset and the attitude to handle whatever hard things come our way, then we've got it. We've got it. Instead of thinking, why me? A lot of people would ask during that time, do you just sit and think, why did this happen to our family? Instead of thinking, why me? If we can truly think, why not me? Because some higher power, whatever that is for you, believes in you. Some higher power knows that you have a potential that you cannot even begin to understand. And so during this time, these two mottos came out in our family, and we've seen these over and over and over again in the last 8 years since we came up with these mottos. When they do hard things, they kind of sometimes hate it, that I'll say Hawks do, and then they'll all shout back. They'll either, at the beginning, the first couple of years, it was hard things, and some of the younger still say hard things. The elders are like, hard things. So, but just recently, actually, two of my oldest kids were on a podcast, which was super cool to see my kids, 12 and 10 years old, on a podcast. It was actually a Christian-based podcast, which was awesome. If you're interested in hearing it, definitely reach out to me. It was so sweet and so inspirational. It's super inspirational about how they got trapped in a storm in kayaks, and they thought of that family motto. So even though they sometimes mock it, the Hawks do hard things, Mom. It was so great as a mother to realize that our family motto had sunk in. But also that motto of, why not us? Why not us to do something great? Why not us to have hard things come into our life? Because that higher power, whatever that is for you, believes in you. And so instead of taking it as, when hard things come, instead of taking it as a why me situation, take it as almost a badge of honor. Of some higher power knows that I'm strong enough to handle this, even though if I don't think I am. But I know that you are. Why not you to live the life that you want to live? Why not you to take those vacations you want to take? Why not you to invest in land? Like, I don't know, when I come to these conferences, I am so like a squirrel, because to be honest, I've never done land. I've done a lot of stuff in real estate, but even when I come to these conferences, I'm like, yes, now I need to do land. Or I listen to Stacy and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've totally got to do storage units. Like, so in these conferences, you're gonna want to do all the things. You're going to want to do all the things. Why not you to do all the things? You can do all the things. You just can't do all the things right now. So you've got to decide what your goal is down the road. And I know that this might sound, sorry that we're getting to the B&B stuff soon, but for me, you have to, if you're investing in real estate, you have to understand what your goal is. What is 5 years from now? Where do you want to be? Because that's what's going to determine what's next. Because for me, at the time when my son was diagnosed with cancer, we were going through radiation treatments. I remember going to my husband and saying, I just can't sit around and watch him die anymore. Because that's what I felt like I was doing. The doctors kept taking my baby away and I couldn't do anything. It was up to the doctors and the Lord. There was really not much I could do other than just hold my baby and give him as much love as I could. And so at that time I said, honey, I've got a crazy idea. What if, stick with me, what if we actually did some of those things that we actually talked about doing when we were dating and newlyweds? What if, you know how we used to talk about becoming real estate investors and building a portfolio and all this? Like, what if we did those things, right? And thank goodness for an amazing husband who first off said, well, honey, we kind of have a lot of things on our plate right now, but if you want to do this, I think you should do this. And so I started my first company of Hock Homes because I was going to flip houses. I had read Robert Kiyosaki, I had read Robert Allen, I had read all these different things that I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start, I'd done my homework, right? But it all goes back to finding that harmony. Okay. Finding those two things. If you're going to always be looking for a balance, that's going to be hard. One thing might fall off, but you've got to find a harmony to see how they both work together. Okay. So Hock Homes was doing awesome. We were winning awards. We were, had multiple offers every single time we listed a property, and we're making list price. Like, it was so great. And like my after repair values, it was like, yes, 10,000 over my after repair value because I'm always so cautious. And so it was great. It was awesome. But then one year, it wasn't awesome anymore, guys. In fact, it was terrible. This was about 2017 going into 2018, where I was burnt out on flipping houses. I was so over it. We had all sorts of crappy things happening. We had the biggest was a terrible lawsuit with a general contract we had used for many properties. We thought we were family, but he just got a little too relaxed and not meaning to place blame. We were in a lawsuit, and it was basically like a terrible like divorce, and it ended with terrible amounts of money and costing just the legal fees alone, let alone the fact that we had 6 brand new construction homes, because at this time we were doing tear down new builds with this contractor. And so we had leveraged about $5 million that we weren't allowed to touch the properties while this was in a lawsuit for 6 months. And so we had all that interest accruing on these $5 million worth of properties that was just making me nauseous, literally nauseous, literally in a ball curled up on the floor of my closet or throwing up in the toilet because I was so nauseous about this. I was always thinking about my private lenders. I was always thinking about, to be completely honest, I was having nightmares about this one family that had lent $750,000 with us, and they had invested their amazing husband and father's 9/11 memorial fund. I loved this family. I've never met this family, but they had invested money with us for over 5 years. And I knew them from Facebook, and we had become that type of friend, but I knew this family and they trusted me, and there was no way I could let their dad's legacy die with me going bankrupt. And I remember when my attorney said, all right, let's talk about declaring bankruptcy. I was like, you do not understand. As much as I would hate to, I would have my family with all 5 of my kids live in a cardboard box than to have to say to these people that they are not getting their money that they entrusted with me with. Even though, yes, I could have easily declared bankruptcy, that was just not something I felt okay about. And it was just terrible. Anyways, so that year I was like, you know what? This isn't fun anymore, guys. That harmony was not there. It was not there. We had all sorts of stuff going on, but just trust me, it was bad, guys. It was bad. And I almost felt like that when my husband and I had talked for over a decade about someday we're going to get into real estate investing. We're going to be so awesome, right? And we had talked about how perfect it was going to be when we started investing in real estate, right? And it's almost like there was this mountain that we had pictured in our head that the view was going to be so amazing. And then finally, it took cancer to get us to finally start climbing that mountain. And as we started climbing that mountain, it felt like we had we could kind of see the beautiful view, and we started getting closer to the top, and the view was like, oh, this is really cool. This is cool. But then all of a sudden there was an avalanche that just, and it's like, oh man, I hadn't thought about this avalanche. Like I hadn't planned on an avalanche in what I thought was going to be the perfect view. And that as I started to dig myself out, I started to realize that I had to make a decision. I had to find out. I mean, I should have a quote in here from the Cheshire Cat, right? It totally depends on where you want to go, because you're going to listen to this conference and there's going to be so many different options of ways to make money. And like I said, you can eventually do all of them, but you can't do them all right now. Okay. And so you've got to decide which niches are you focusing on right now. And some of them you can interrelate. Like I love owner financing. I love using owner financing and creative financing techniques that play into each other. But make sure that you're not just, you've got to decide, okay, what am I going to focus on right now? Because what's going to get me to my dream day? And as I sat with my husband and we said, what do we really want out of life? Like, where do we see ourselves in 2 years? At this time, like we try to do this twice a year. We say quarterly, but usually twice a year, we try to go on a getaway together and really talk about our dream day and how we're doing on our goals and where we see ourselves in 2 years from now. And when we sat down to do this exercise, I realized that flipping houses wasn't doing that for me anymore. It had taken over, and my harmony was all out of whack. Okay. So I decided, I mean, something that we always try to live by is to build a life that you don't need a vacation from. Okay. So I love that quote. And if you're always thinking every time you say yes or no, if you're deciding if it, if it's not a heck yes, then it's a heck no. Okay. First off. And if it doesn't go into building the life that you don't need a vacation from, then get rid of it, because it's bringing in some sort of chaos, or if it's bringing in some sort of negativity. Right. So anyway, so we decided, okay, we know we definitely need an additional stream of income. We knew we wanted to stay in real estate. But I was done flipping houses. We were still in notes. We still had long terms. We were still doing other things, but I had to replace flipping houses, and that was taking up a lot of my time, and I wanted to do something else. So at the time, we realized, as we're digging ourselves out of the avalanche, we had 3 different options. We could either, the easiest option would have been to go back down to the bottom, and to go back down and just give up and just be like, forget it. This was too risky. What were we thinking? We leveraged $5 million and we almost lost everything. We almost lost everything. It would have been so easy to say, no, I'm done with this. Get off this mountain. I never want to see this mountain again. But you guys, I was really worried that if I got off the mountain, if I went back down, I was really worried that I would never get back on any mountain. You know what I mean? That I was worried that I would never take any risks again. And I'm so glad, because we were really close to taking that option, to be honest. But I'm so glad I looked at the other options. The second option was to go back up to the top of the mountain and work our way up. And I'm not saying that I was like at the top of the mountain, right there. I'm not like saying that I was like at the top, but we were doing some awesome stuff. And I could see what the view was going to be from that part of the mountain. And that wasn't bringing the harmony and the vacation lifestyle and the dream lifestyle that I wanted. And the reason why I had left corporate America, right? So it wasn't, I knew that the view from the top of that mountain wasn't what I wanted. But it was that point that we realized there's a third option. The avalanche had actually created a bridge. Thank you for staying with me through my metaphor, by the way. So the avalanche had created this bridge that for us was short-term rentals. Short-term rentals, as we started to realize, at that time, during 2017, when things were going crazy, I was like, you know what, I've got to find a different stream of real estate income. So I started my first 4 Airbnbs in 4 months. And as a few months later, and as we were like, what are we going to do? Like, where are we really going to focus? It was like, well, those are doing awesome. And those were pretty darn easy. And so for us, it was like this thing that had kind of fallen in our laps. Not really. I mean, it took work, right? But we never planned on that being like a primary source of income. It was just kind of like, oh, let's add that as a stream of income. But we realized these are doing awesome. And we could easily have like 20 of these, like super easy. And so as we started on this bridge of short-term rentals, all of a sudden we realized all these other things that we had time to do and that we wanted to explore investing in, and all these other buckets that we could put streams of income into. And it was like this whole view that I would have never seen if I wouldn't have gone up the first mountain. And I would have never seen if there wasn't that avalanche. And if we didn't have the courage to go on that bridge. So for me, kind of the basics of the difference between rehabbing or flipping houses and short-term rentals. Here we go. Okay. Sorry, my setup is not great. My double screens are not impressive right now. Okay. So for rehabbing, okay, you get these sporadic big checks, right? You know what I'm talking about when you finally, first off, my favorite day of flipping houses is always when the photographer comes, because it's like, it's beautiful, and there's lines in the carpet, and it's like you've worked, and this beautiful piece of artwork is ready to be presented to the world. It's so fabulous. And then you put it on the market, and hopefully within a few days you have all sorts of people offering to have your house. And in a perfect world, this doesn't ever happen, but in a perfect world, the buyers are like, you know what? I've looked over the inspection report and it doesn't matter, because the house is beautiful and I love everything. I don't care that my inspector came up with a 40-page report. I just love everything about the house. All right. Okay. So let's say that that's what would happen, because how awesome would that be? Right. But you finally sell this property and you get hopefully a big old check, which is awesome. Okay. But then all of a sudden you go out, you celebrate, it's wonderful, and you go to sleep and you wake up the next morning. It's like, all right, let's go at it again. Let's find another one from the start, you know? Now hopefully you have a pipeline. So you have other things going on in the background, right? You have other projects coming along, but it's always looking for more projects to start, right? Now, on the other side with short-term rental, you're going to put a lot of time into, not a lot, you spend a couple weeks into opening a short-term rental, but then after that, you're hoping to have that property for years and years and years. And you're going to have to do like maintenance, right? You're definitely going to have to do maintenance, but it's the flip of flipping houses. Okay. Get it? It's the flip of flipping houses that you set it up and then it magically, you guys, magically, this money just deposits itself into my account every single day. And it's so wonderful. I don't have to wait for that big check, hoping that the after repair value that I guessed was right. Not guessed, but you calculated, right? You don't have to do that. This money just keeps on magically coming in, recurring stream of income, which is wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Okay. And kind of what we talked about before is that you with flipping, you're going to work really hard and then you celebrate and then you find a new project. And this one is you start with that big week and then it's pretty low key after that for years and years and years, but it keeps on bringing you this stream of income. Now also with flipping, as I mentioned, like for us, it was $5 million that it was mid fours, right? Okay. So I don't want to exaggerate. I'm not my sister. In our family, we always tease my sister that she's an exaggerator, but so it's like $4.5 million, right? It was a lot of money. In my opinion, it was a lot of money and it still made me want to vomit every time I talked about how much money I owed people. And so with that, with flipping, you have to have that mindset. With short-term rentals, it's different. You have startup costs that are, depending on the size of property, you're looking at about 10,000, okay, depending on what size of house, but that's kind of the range. So you have those startup costs, especially we're going to talk about how this is using other people's property, okay, because you don't even have to come up with a down payment, right? So it's just like the $10,000 for like furnishings and towels and sheets and dishes and everything like that. But then it's very low maintenance costs, especially if you're using other people's properties, because if the air conditioning breaks, that's right. That's not on you. That's on the landlord. Okay. We're going to get to that in just a second. All right. Now, yeah, there you go. All right. So with short-term rentals, there are so many things that we could talk about with this topic, right? We could talk about how to hunt for properties and everything. And today we're just going to kind of give a little overview. I don't know what Russ is talking about, but yeah, so there's so many things we could talk about on this journey. And just a reminder that whatever you end up doing, your success is up to you. Sorry, my attorneys make me say that. But I really believe that anybody, if me as a mom of 5 kids, when I started this, I had 5 kids under the age of 8. 5 kids under the age of 8, you guys. And that when I was flipping houses, like the harmony was like, blah. Okay. Because instead of being at soccer games, I'd like cast the last 5 minutes of soccer games because I'd be at projects, making sure that my contractors were working on a Saturday morning. But with short-term rentals, you can do it all from like your phone and you can very easy outsource so much of it that for me, short-term rentals provided that way that I could be a superhero mom, but also a superhero investor at the same time, that harmony finally came into place. Okay. Now, before I forget, I always need to mention that AJ is doing awesome. You guys, he is so funny. He is so funny. And I'm so grateful for every single day that I get to spend with him. It is an honor to be his mother. And he is just a joy in our life. And we are so grateful. We are so grateful that he's doing so well. We, out of his Ronald McDonald graduating class, he's the only one still around. And I'm very, very mindful of how lucky we are and how blessed we are to have him. And I feel like the Lord, whoever that is for you, I don't mean to offend anyone. I feel like the Lord was telling me that you need to take advantage of this amazing gift I've given you. Because he is a special one, you guys. All of my kids are, of course. But he is so special that it's like the Lord knew I needed that wake-up call. So not only that I could create that life for my family, but I also think he has a plan for me to help others do that. And that's, Stacy teased me about my curtain, but that's what Why Not Me Academy is all about, is why not you to actually create the lifestyle you want to create so that you can be the better human that the Lord needs you to be, or whatever higher power that is for you, because you have a potential on this earth and you need to be doing what you can to accomplish that. Okay. So sorry, Stacy knows my monthly subgroup that I do is mindset. So sometimes I get off on the mindset because I kind of geek out on time management and mindset, but I know I'm talking about short-term rentals. So I'm sorry, I'll try to get back on fast. Okay. Now, when I say Airbnbs, I actually mean short-term rentals. Okay. It's kind of like chapstick, Kleenex. Okay. It's just a brand name, but it means the whole thing, right? So when I say Airbnb, I really mean short-term rentals. It could be on any booking platform that you're using, HomeAway, VRBO, bookings.com, your own website. But when I say Airbnb, that's what I mean. Okay. Now people are going to ask next, well, which one do I use? Which platform should I use? And that's a longer conversation to have, because there are so many contributing factors. One of the biggest ones for me is how long you want to leave your calendar open. Okay. So for me, because most of my properties, when I start, I highly recommend starting using other people's properties to test out the property before you commit to it, which we'll talk about in a second. Okay. So when I when I take on a property, I am dating this property. I'm dating this landlord before I commit to marrying it, right? So I haven't bought it. I haven't put down a down payment. And so I only like to keep my calendar open for 3 months in advance to get my bookings, because I'm still waiting to see if I even like this girl that I'm the landlord, right? And the property, to make sure that the neighbors aren't going to be complaining and whiny, all those things. So I usually only keep my calendar open for about 3 months in advance. And so that means most VRBOs are open for like a year in advance. Okay. You don't have to, but a lot of people who are looking on VRBO, it's vacation rentals by owner. Whereas my properties are more transient short-term rentals, okay, or corporate rentals, or people who are like, if you go outside of any of my properties, you're not going to see a palm tree, you're not going to see a lake, you're not going to see a beach, okay, because that's not, I'm not in vacation rentals. I also have some vacation rentals that we're starting to get more of, but that's not like my main part of my business. Okay. So depending on what type, if yours is a vacation rental, if it's more of a transient rental, that will determine which platform to use. Okay. But there's lots more we could talk about on that, but that's just kind of a brief overview of that. Now, when I say Airbnb or when I say short-term rental, I want you to picture what you think of. If you were to go on vacation next week and you were staying in an Airbnb, what do you picture? Because here are some of the examples that I love to talk about. I've been using these for a long time. Romantic bus in the forest, dome in the forest, clock tower guest suite, secluded in-town treehouse, dog bark park inn, and you guys, no joke, there are RVs that are going for $236 a night in California. Now I know that that's an amazing view, right? And I'm sure your Airstream is lovely, sir. But $236 a night? Are you kidding me? Right? Like, that's a lot of money. And you guys, hammocks going for $25 a night. You'll notice there's no bathroom included, but they're still putting up hammocks in their backyard and making $25 a night, right? How awesome is that? How awesome is this business that you can be as creative as you want? Okay. Now, we're going to talk about the 3 different types of Airbnb hosting. Ownership, arbitrage, and co-hosting. Okay. Like I said, I do not recommend starting with ownership unless it fits under one of these categories. One, you already have the place. Maybe it's your basement. Maybe it's a vacation home you have and you want to just start earning a little extra money on it. Maybe it's a guest house that you have. Maybe you have long-term rentals and you want to see if they'll work as short-term rentals. Maybe you have a favorite destination that you know you're trying to get a lake house or a beach house and it gives you an excuse to buy whatever you want. Okay. Or if you've already tested the neighborhood, once I have a good performing property, then I want to buy that whole cul-de-sac. Okay. Once I have a good one that I probably started as an arbitrage, but once I know that, then I know that neighborhood's good. And I know that how much I'm going to make, what the occupancy rates are going to be for those properties. Once you have all those numbers, then all right, now there's still that wild card of, well, I don't know the roof situation or the HVAC situation. So, you walk that line on your own. But usually once I know that a neighborhood is good to go and it's going to perform the way that I want to, and if they're very similar houses, then heck yeah, then you're going to start sending yellow letters. You're going to start targeting those people and say, I want to buy your house or rent it, whatever you want. I want to be the last renter you ever have because I want to buy it from you someday, So then you start your creative financing, all of that. Okay. Sorry. That's also an awesome other topic within Airbnb, but we don't have time to talk about it today. Okay, like I said, once you know the going rate, the occupancy, the neighbors, then okay, those are okay to use ownership. But most of the time, you might as well start, if you don't have any of those going for you right now, then you're going to want to be using other people's properties to start. Why would you want to use other people's properties, you ask? Well, I'm glad you asked. The first one is because when I started, you guys remember I was like $4.5 million in debt, and I did not have the money to go buying. When I first started, I was like, I want to do 4 in the first 4 months, right? It just kind of happened that way. Can you imagine if I would have had to have a down payment for each of those bad boys? Little Miss $4.5 million in debt was not going to be able to handle that. So it helps you to be able to scale so much faster when you're not having to wait and gather a big down payment or private lenders or whatever. Okay. Like I talked about before, when you're using other people's property, it gives you a chance to date the property before you commit to marrying it. Okay. So it's kind of like, when you dated or dating, then it's like, you're trying to figure out all the quirks of the property. You're trying to find out all the quirks of the area, okay? Before you commit to marrying that property. Now, like I said, it gives you a chance to test the location and the neighbors, make sure you're testing your rates. Also major fixes, okay? So like, if you find a quirk with a property that it's like, oh yeah, every night, if you have people complaining, the toilet handle, it seems to be working, but it jiggles funny and it runs for like an hour and then it finally stops. You know what? You're going to find out all the quirks before you marry it. So you know what you're getting into before you put down the big down payment and commit to this house, right? Wouldn't that be cool if we could do that on our own properties, by the way? Like, that would be awesome before you buy your own personal house. Yeah. With this type of real estate, you can. I'm just saying, it's pretty darn awesome. I don't know if you could tell, but after my after my kind of crazy time, I was having a really hard time with risk. And so with this type of real estate investing, you don't have as much risk, which is something that I really needed at that time of my life. Okay. So either types of these, using other people's properties, you start with the house. Okay. You start with the house and you have Mr. Landlord. You guys, let's see, did they stop? I'm sorry if you're hearing the knocking. Ignore the knocking. Happy Saturday. Me coming to you from home, y'all. Okay, so you start with the house and you've got a landlord. He puts up a sign. Guys, he puts up a sign that says this is for rent. Now, when I was flipping houses, every once in a while, it would be because somebody had put a sign up or they had put up a listing. But my best deals were not from somebody that had said, please come and take my house. It was from the ones that I dug up, right? But with this type of investing, you are simply responding to people's ads. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds in your area of people who wanting people to rent, right? Now, right now, market's a little bit crazy. Okay. So I usually don't open properties between April and July because usually that's crazy rental time. Although last year, I usually don't open properties during the summer. That's the time when I travel with my kids. That's when whatever. But we had different people come up to me. So then I do. Okay. So once you're to a point where they start approaching you, then sure. But usually that's not a time for me to go looking for houses because I don't want to be competing with the crazy market. Right. But last year that totally changed. This year, I still have a lot of people that are reaching out saying, hey, I still want to, can you come do what you do? Right. So anyways, guys, I got my Saturday mind on, and I had COVID the last couple weeks. And you guys, the brain fog is real. It's very real. But so I'm sorry if I'm not always quite as digressing as I am right now. So hope that's okay. Okay, so Mr. Landlord puts up a sign for rent, and here comes me with my gaggle of children, right? And I say, I would like to rent your house. It's so perfect. It's exactly what we've been looking for. It's so perfect. I would really, really love to have a deeper conversation about it because we're kind of unique renters, but it's perfect. It's exactly what we've been looking for. I haven't said anything about being a short-term rental host yet. Okay. I've told him how perfect it is, and I've charmed him, and I've talked to him, and oh my gosh, it's so great. So great. Okay. Then once they are like, oh yes, tell me more about you as a unique renter. Then that's where you're going to just overwhelm them with how great of a renter you are. You're going to tell them that you're going to have it professionally cleaned multiple times a week or month. You're going to keep it in 5-star status. In fact, we're going to stage it, probably kind of like semi-professionally stage it. And I will send you those pictures because they're going to be gorgeous because I love staging properties and I love doing it really well. And you can have those professional photos because they're going to be gorgeous. And if I ever do leave, even though that's not my plan, Mr. Landlord, because I want to be the last tenant you ever have. And when you're ready to sell, I want to buy your house because I love buying houses. And then you're also going to say, we can use your contract. I just need to make sure that we put an addendum on it because the reason why we are so unique, okay, after you've told them all those great things about why the house is perfect for you, why you are perfect for the house, that you want to be the last tenant they ever have in that property, you're going to keep it so clean, then you're going to say, and because the way that we actually use it is we are able to pay usually early our rent on time or early if that works, because we are going to rent it out as a short-term rental. Okay, so we rent it from you and then we rent it out as a short-term rental, and that means that we are getting graded every time we have somebody stay in here, and that affects how much we make. And so then you're going to go off on that area of it. Okay. So next. Now, what is the difference between arbitrage and co-hosting? Now, arbitrage, you are going to pay monthly regular rent. Okay, so you're going to sign a regular contract, monthly payments. You set up a bill pay, and it's a normal, a normal agreement. Okay, now with co-hosting, you're going to pay a percentage of the revenue. Okay, you're going to pay a percentage of the revenue. So this one is a little bit harder. Each month you're going to have to do the bookkeeping on it, that you are going to have to look at how much you make. And then this is basically property management for short-term rental hosts. Okay, so all right. People always ask, well, which one's better? Well, that depends on what you want to do. It depends on your location. It depends on your phase of life. It depends on if you have money for arbitrage because with arbitrage, you're usually paying for your furniture, but with co-hosting, you can be a little bit more creative and have them pay for the furniture. Am I good?
Keep going. You're good right there. Perfect.
Okay. Can you still see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, actually, no, something's happening to your slide. That like went all weird.
It did?
Yeah. Try to just stop and then restart. There you go. And that's good.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that, guys. My bad. I'm so sorry. All right. So arbitrage versus co-hosting. It depends on where you are in life. It depends on if you want to pay for the furniture. It depends on if it depends on all these different things that go into it. Okay, but with either of these, you can be super creative. You can be creative about how you finance it, if you're going to pay monthly rents or if you're going to do like a lease option on it. You can be creative of if they want to pay for the furniture, you want to pay for the furniture, all those things. The world is your oyster, my friend. Just make sure that you have it legally documented, whatever you decide to do. Okay, properly legally documented. If you're just looking to get into it, and you don't have like any money, then co-hosting might be a great way to start. But you can also do arbitrage and put a lot of it on a 0% credit card because the goal is to break even within 6 to 8 months. That's my goal. And then after that, you just get to pocket all of that cash, right? So you'll be able to pay off a 0% credit card during that 12 months. You should be. able to. So I'm not making any guarantees, but if you do it right, you should be able to. Okay. Whereas with co-hosting, sometimes some of my students, if they have really bad credit and they're struggling to find somebody that will rent to them, then co-hosting is a great way to start. Co-hosting is always great to start. But so yeah, just keep that in mind. All right. Now I always, in the last year, people keep asking, oh, how's your business going? I've heard short-term rentals took a big hit, right? So yes, when, especially if you were on Airbnb and if that was a main source of your bookings, back in March of last year, when Airbnb announced to all of their customers that you can get a refund if you want, then that was a really hard 48 hours, guys. We lost a lot of money in bookings during that 48 hours. And we were a little terrified. I'm not going to lie. It was scary for 48 hours. Really scary. We saw, like, not only us, but like all of our students, like hundreds of thousands of dollars of bookings for the next 6 months just were disappearing off the calendar. And it's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Okay. Weeks number 1 and 2, we started realizing, okay, what are we going to do when this kind of crappy thing happens to the world? How do we still survive? And guess what? There are still people that needed housing, and they needed housing because they were no longer traveling to the places they were planned on, or there were traveling nurses, or there are repeat customers that had come to visit family all of a sudden wanted to come and stay for 3 months with their elderly parents so that they could be close by as they, weathered this storm together, right? And so during the week 1 and 2, we were like, okay, we can do this. Weeks 3 and 5, we were like, here we go. Like, yes, okay, we've got all of our properties back to booking. It was at a big discount, guys. I'm not gonna lie. In months 1 and 2, it was at a big discount. But you know what? How lucky were we to be in real estate and to still be in the black? We still made money. That was awesome. Okay, so it wasn't what we were used to making, which stunk, because my husband had just left corporate America a few months earlier. So that kind of stunk. But by the end of month 2, we were like, okay, we've got this. We've got this. And then all of a sudden, this beautiful thing started happening where Americans started deciding, oh, traveling domestically is fabulous. And they also got a little stir crazy. And so one of my students just sent me a Airbnb sends you these emails and it says searches in your area are up by 200%. And hers was like, searches in your area from last year are up 3,900%. Like, it was like crazy, right? Because compared to March and April of last year, all of a sudden this year is doing awesome. And we're charging more per night than we ever did before COVID. Okay, so now short-term rentals are awesome, doing great. It also weeded out a lot of the hosts that didn't want to do it anymore because it got scary for those 2 months. And so weeded out a lot of hosts. Now I don't know if I have time to talk about this. Okay, so during that time, like I said, I usually don't open properties during the summer, but I had a bunch of people reach out to me. And so we decided, oh, okay, yeah, let's open some properties. So we opened 5 properties in 10 days last June. And one of which we decided to rent out our home, our personal home, because we decided, and before we even opened these, right? So we opened 5 in 10 days. And before we opened any of them, this is how much each of them already had in bookings before we opened them. And I believe this was in June of last year. Okay. So I'm a huge advocate. As soon as you have a contract, as soon as you know that you are getting this place, you put it up on the platforms that you're going to put it on. You start getting bookings. I know you don't have pictures, but people still might book. Okay, so huge, awesome thing that before I even had to start paying for the access to that house, I had this amount of income ready to come in as soon as I took the keys to that house. That doesn't happen with flipping houses, guys. Like, I already had access to all these people's credit cards for before I had done anything, right? So love it, love it. So it was like 15K in bookings before we had even opened any of the properties. Now, like I said, we did rent out our house because one of those goals, I don't know if you remember, was to travel the world with our kids. And so during that time, when we decided to rent our house, we decided to take off, and we went and we biked the Golden Gate Bridge, and we went to all these cool factories like the Jelly Belly factory. We went to all these national parks, and we went exploring for 3 months across the country. We went to Chicago and Mount Rushmore and Solvang, this cool little Danish village in California. So anyways, I wouldn't have been able to do that if I was flipping houses, guys. Now, I know that there are a lot of people out there that are awesome at flipping houses, and they somehow train project managers a heck of a lot better than I ever could. But flipping houses, I felt like as soon as I left my project manager for more than a week, they needed help again. So I love that with short-term rentals, it truly provides a lifestyle that we don't need a vacation from. Now, how do we do this all? Because, it does take some time, but it's so much less risk and so much less in-person time than any, and I shouldn't say any, but more than flipping houses and that sort of thing. So like I talked about, there's a long thing. It's not risk-free, but man, it is tried and tested, and it's so much less leverage than flipping houses. Hopefully, I've convinced you of the awesomeness and the potential of Airbnb. Made it with 8 minutes for questions. If you want to,
we have some questions.
Okay, good. Reach out to me for sure on any. I would recommend Instagram. I'm faster on those, but yeah.
Okay, and then also, when is your session?
Yes, mine is the third Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern time. Okay. So I think Rich's B&B conversation is the first Tuesday, and mine is the third. Mine isn't B&B focused. We actually are kind of like an accountability book group, and we talk about mindset and productivity of experienced investors. So this month, if you want to join us, we are reading a book called Everything is Figure-Outable. And last month we did Eat That Frog. So we just do different mindset books. We talk about it for about 20 minutes, and then we kind of have a little accountability session, and then we do a little bit of mindset and time management. So
I love it. Because the thing is that, I mean, when people get into anything new, they just start talking themselves out of it.
Yeah.
And so I'm so glad that you're doing this. You're at least, you're there to hold them accountable. If they have any questions or anything like that, they can just come to you. Like if they start freaking out and stuff.
Yeah. And I love that our group has kind of started like a little Facebook side, like conversation of how are you doing on this? I know you mentioned this, and like, that's cool. Like it is an accountability group, even though I love REI USA that it's people all over the nation, so you can learn so much about different areas, but also that virtually you can feel like your best friends. And so like one hopped on the other day and was like, hey, somebody mentioned that they work in Miami. I'm looking for this, blah, blah, blah. So super cool. If you want to be a part of our accountability group / mindset group / book club for awesome investors.
I love it. I love it. Awesome. All right, cool. So let's ask a couple of questions. One of them was, how do you find people who want to co-host?
Great question. Okay. So to be honest, my first co-hosting the first one was from the local REIA. Okay. Local investors that have always wanted to kind of get into short-term rentals, but they don't really want to take the time to do it, but they kind of want to do it. You know what I mean? So those type of people that have that mindset, whereas Mr. Person for rent by owner, that's almost a little bit too much for him. No, I just want my monthly check, but so it's got to be somebody that has that mindset, or depending on where you live, also people who travel a lot or they live somewhere else and this is just a vacation home. So we have 3 different people that they live internationally and they only come to the area for 2 to 4 months a year. And so when they're gone, we manage their property for them. So those are, when you're starting to co-host, those are the 2 that you're looking for, like an investor mindset that like kind of wants to dabble in that. So, but that's mostly through a network or Facebook groups or whatever, your local investor mindset people, or people who this is not their full-time residence. That's where I recommend starting for co-hosting.
We have one that says, how do you use other people's properties when they themselves could have benefited from the same thing? You know what I'm saying? So why would somebody, basically what they're saying is like, why would somebody want you to arbitrage their home or co-host it when they could just do it.
I know, right? But why? Well, I mean, there's so many things you could say that about, right? In fact, the example I'll give is I remember one of the first big money seminars I went to that I had paid like a lot. I had paid like 5 figures to be at this event, right? And at that time, that was like a heck of a lot of money for just a 3-day seminar, right? Like crazy, right? And I remember going to this seminar, and at the end of the first day, the speaker gave us a challenge, and it was super easy, super easy. It was like, call your credit company to see if you can get your credit raised or something like that, right? And he said, we're going to check tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And this was a group of 500 investors. And I was like, I went home and I was like, we're adults. Like, who's actually going to do that, right? But he said he'd give anybody the person who increased their credit limit the most. Like, and I know that that's like a ploy that people use in those conferences, so we won't talk about that, right? But it was still like, at the time, it was like, okay, well, is this worth my time? And he said, I'll give whoever does it the most, I'll give $1,000 to. And I was like, my gosh, that's so not worth my time. I'm not going to win. That was a room of 500 investors. It's not worth my time. Well, I got to the event the next morning 5 minutes early, which never happens with me, by the way. So I got there like 5 minutes early, and I was like, what am I going to do? And so I was like, you know what? I'll call my credit company. And so I called and I raised it, whatever amount, right? And so we go in, and the first thing he says is, how many of you did the assignment? And out of that room of 500 people, they all had access to $1,000 that morning. And he was holding up the $1,000. Said, how many of you did it? And out of that whole room of 500 people, only 4 of us had done it. And I was almost embarrassed, like, well, I just did it like 5 minutes ago. And he's like, but you still did it. And come to find out, I was only $100 away from winning the $1,000. Now, how crazy is that any of us in that room had access to that $1,000? But not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody wants to put in the work. So the answer to the question is, yeah, every single one of you on this call could be running a short-term rental, but not everybody's going to. Okay, so same thing with the landlord is they just don't want the hassle of it. They don't want to have to deal with all the guests, but they don't want to have to, like, to them, they don't even understand, like, where would I even start? Okay, so it's the same thing that every single person could be having a short-term rental and be making good money, but most people just don't want to. They just don't want to add that hassle to their life. So hopefully that was the answer. I mean, did I get the question right?
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, did I answer that? I have no idea. Okay. And then also one final question. Who would be responsible for the insurance, the owner or you?
Okay, great question. So there's different types of insurance, right? You have to protect the actual property, and then somebody has to protect the stuff, and then somebody has to protect the liability if somebody slips and falls. Okay, so there's kind of those 3 main types of insurance. Okay, now for me, I have an umbrella policy for my liability, and I also have a policy for my stuff. Okay, but if the house burns down, I only need that if I own the property. So the landlord needs burning down the house insurance if that's, because that's what they need to cover, is the burning down the house. So you just need to make sure that you have the actual dwelling, the stuff inside, and the liability. So there's 3 types of insurance. And so you just, depending on the landlord, they might have a policy that covers, they should have a policy that covers theirs. And that's why people sometimes will be like, well, do I even have to tell the landlord? I'm like, oh, you're a terrible person if you don't. No, I'm just kidding. I don't really say that. But yes, of course you need to tell your landlord. Otherwise, you're going to get burned down the road, right? Yeah. So definitely tell your landlord so that they can be properly covered, because to be honest, sometimes their insurance doesn't cover having a short-term rental person in, but you're also a long-term renter. So there's so many different policies out there. You just got to make sure that somebody is covering all 3 of those things.
It's insurance. There's got to be a policy out there.
Yeah.
It's all a scam. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, MeiLani, for coming to hang out with us today. I really appreciate it.